Hello there, YouTube. Kokomo Friday is up next.
Domingo Santana, ooh, I wanna have ya. Tanaka's Fakakta, Jag like Michael Waka, Polanco and Franco. Where they're gonna get into first place. Check Batted Valdeta and swinging strike rates. Raisins are shriveled grapes. Here's Adam's happy place.
Happy Kokomo St. Patrick's Friday, and welcome in to Fantasy Baseball today on March 17th. Frank Stampfl joined by Scott White and Chris Towers today on the show. Yeah, Scotty, pumped up.
I noticed you two aren't wearing green. Green on St.
Are
Patrick's
you?
Day. Gonna come pinch you.
Yeah, I guess you're wearing green. It's like
I am.
like a hunter green or something.
Yeah, it's green. It was conscious. It was deliberate. I planned on scolding you two for not for not.
I don't
being
know if
cognizant enough.
I don't know if I really have anything that's green. Like,
oh, wow.
Frank and I are meeting up in the city tomorrow, and I had no idea it was when I agreed to this. I had no idea it was St. Patrick's Day, and like, I almost backed out.
And instead, what Chris did is he chose the most Irish bar that you could imagine.
Yeah,
so he did the complete opposite.
It's gonna be a good time. It's gonna be a good time.
I'm a Jets fan, so I have no excuse. I have a bunch of green stuff around here.
I just do not have like green. Green looks good on everybody. You know, like I think green's the color that looks best on me.
I don't think I have any
blonde hair or
I'm
dark
very
brown.
blue. My wardrobe's very blue heavy. So I think I have like one Henley, but I don't know. Might have to throw that on tomorrow just so I don't get pinched.
I'm a Jets fan, and I don't like the color green. I kind of wish they would change their jersey color. So sorry, Scott, but I'm out on green.
Come on, gang green.
But
unfortunately, their black jerseys are really boring. So you don't really have a lot of alternatives.
I like the black.
I remember I talked to Frank about this like a couple months ago. I was talking about what colors are overrepresented in uniform combinations. Certainly navy blue is a lot of red and navy blue. I was saying like one color combination. I don't think there's a team with this color combination, like a forest green with a brown, like green and brown. And the look of disgust on his face when I suggested this.
You know, it's poo colors.
I think the Milwaukee Bucks have a green and tan jersey. That's about the closest that
they do. Yeah.
Anywho,
you're right. I think maybe in the 90s the Bucks color scheme may have been close.
That'd be a struggle for people with color blindness.
Yeah, not great. Well, I do enjoy St. Patrick's Day, so we're gonna have a nice little time tomorrow, Chris. Well, today when people are listening to this, we've wasted enough time. Position preview updates today on the podcast, as well as the reveal of our Listener League participants. We'll announce that later on in the podcast. Let's start with catcher. My idea for this is basically what has changed since we did our position previews. Is there anyone who's been on the rise? Is there someone who's performing really well in the spring? And then we'll just give out one or two of our favorite targets to draft. Start with catcher, and it goes about 9 to 11 deep, depending on who you ask. Feel really good with one of those top 11 for me as my catcher one. Someone who has been on the rise, having a great spring, is Gabriel Moreno, 7 for 17 with 2 home runs with the Arizona Diamondbacks. I don't know if the playing time will be there for him right away, but just showing that he has the ability to hit fly balls and hit home runs makes me a little bit more encouraged with Gabriel Moreno. Scott, any other thoughts at the position? Anything that's changed over the past month or so?
Well, I mean, obviously we know for sure that Francisco Alvarez isn't going to be on the Mets roster. It seemed like a long shot going into spring training. Same thing, Bo Naylor for the Guardians roster. I agree. Gabriel Moreno is probably the catcher whose stock has risen the most since we last did this, and he could play a lot because Carson Kelly has never hit righties very well. I mean, Moreno's a right-handed hitter himself, but I could see a scenario where Kelly mostly plays against lefties. Those are definitely going to be the team's two catchers. But my approach at catcher, are we going to get into approach? Just the fact that it's so much, there are so many more quality options there than we're used to seeing. I think for me, it goes through about the number 9 choice, whether that's Sean Murphy or William Contreras. They tend to go in a similar spot. Those 9, I'd be pretty thrilled with any of them as my starting catcher. In one catcher leagues, it's pretty typical for one of them to last pretty late. So I'm basically out on JT Realmuto this year because of that. I don't want to fill that position so early that I miss out on a really cheap option that I still believe is high quality.
So Scott mentioned his top 9 ending with William Contreras and Sean Murphy. Again, I take that 11 deep because I would be perfectly fine with MJ Melendez or Tyler Stevenson as my catcher 1 as well. Chris,
yeah, I think Melendez's ADP is actually higher than both William Contreras and Sean Murphy, but I do have him outside of that group.
Chris, who is your favorite catcher 1 and catcher 2 to draft? Maybe someone early and someone a little bit later on.
Definitely Salvador Perez. I imagine Scott and I are going to have the same answer for that question because it's kind of a fight to see who drafts in between the two of us. But you asked me first, so I'll give Salvador Perez. As for my number 2 catcher, it's probably Gabriel Moreno, as you talked about. It's just it's a chance to take a bite at a high upside player with legitimately very, very good contact skills who, I think has a very high floor as a result of that and could have a, Alejandro Kirk-like impact at the position, if not, hopefully a little better.
Scott, a catcher 1 and catcher 2 that you like to target?
Yeah, it is true. I've been getting a lot of Salvador Perez lately. That's more into catcher leagues where you don't see Sean Murphy and William Contreras go much later than Salvador Perez. And I think Perez is the best bet to lead the position both in home runs and especially RBI. Like he might have 30 more RBI than any other catcher. So if you're talking about a 5x5 league, which is typically a 2-catcher league, I've really warmed up to grabbing him in round 7 or so. Number 2 catcher, I haven't actually drafted Logan O'Hoppe but in theory, I like him as a number 2 catcher. Somebody just always grabs him earlier. Expected starter for the Angels, rookie. I do think Eric Haas is being undervalued. Good power source, going to play a lot for the Tigers.
All right, catcher 1 for me that I've been targeting is Sean Murphy. I wrote him up in Breakouts 2.0. Career numbers outside of Oakland Coliseum are fantastic. He made some big improvements last year in the strikeout rate. And Yasmani Grandal is someone I wind up drafting a lot as my second catcher. Having a good spring so far, 8 for 25 with 1 home run. And I read an article from NBC Sports Chicago this offseason about Grandal's workouts. And they've said watching Grandal go through a rigorous 2-hour workout designed by Chicago Blackhawks strength and conditioning coach Paul Goodman at a gym near the United Center, you can see the fire burning inside of him. He is 10 weeks into a torturous 7-day-per-week training regimen designed to rebuild his body, which he said broke down last season. So I am betting on the bounce back. He obviously goes very late. That is Yasmani Grandal. The first base position, not much has changed so far this spring. It's still very deep. I guess the one injury note to mention is Christian Walker is dealing with a bruised hip. I think he's fine. He got hit by a pitch, so all good there. And
Anthony Rizzo, the fact that he's had back issues continuing this spring, that caused me to lower him a tier at the position.
Well, I guess I should mention Freddie Freeman, right? He is dealing with a hamstring injury and supposed to return on Saturday to spring training action. With that being said, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was dealing with a knee injury most of spring as well, but he recently returned to spring training games as well. So not really much going on here. I know, Scott, you've talked up Trey Mancini and Miguel Vargas. They probably have moved up in the rankings throughout the process for you.
Yeah, they have. I had basically no interest in Trey Mancini when we did the position previews before. And, now I'm more confident he's going to play literally every day for the Cubs. And I was reading more about what he went through last year with that transition from the Orioles to the Astros. Obviously with the Orioles, he was crushed by that huge chasm in left field, like all the right-handed hitters were for them. And then with the Astros, his swing got kind of out of whack, and he didn't have a chance really to fix it because he was playing irregularly. So I think with the Cubs, Trey Mancini could have a nice bounce back season. But Miguel Vargas is really the one I'm excited about here. And the fact he's going to be picking up eligibility at second base early on only helps. I think he is. I think his safest contribution is probably batting average, but with enough power and speed that he's not like a batting average specialist. And so to get that all from a player outside of the top 200, or at least around 200th, I think could be really spectacular.
That is Miguel Vargas with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Looking at the rankings now, I feel confident with any of my top 12 at the position that ends with Rowdy Tellez. But even if you play it in a deeper league, I'd be fine winding up with someone like Josh Bell, who I have down at 17 in the rankings. Chris, any thoughts on first base and your favorite to draft at the position?
Yeah, I think we're kind of in a, like, the guard is about to change at first base because a lot of the best players at the position are kind of old, except the young guys haven't totally stepped up yet. Obviously Pete Alonso and Vladimir Guerrero are very much in their primes, but Freddie Freeman and Paul Goldschmidt are older. Jose Abreu's older. So we're still waiting for the kind of next generation of guys to step up. And so first base feels a little shallow-ish. I do, my favorite player is probably Christian Walker. I just think he's a great value where you can typically get him in like the 10th round range. Very good numbers last season, but if you look under the hood, the quality of contact metrics suggest he was actually even better than his numbers. So I think there's room for growth even from what he did last season. And then if I'm waiting, it's probably Tristan Casas is my favorite player to target. Just think there's a lot to like about his skill set, raw power, plate discipline. He's having a good spring, which helps. 1079 OPS, 34 at bat sample size is not a huge one, but not striking out all too much, which is pretty much what he did last season. Walked a ton last year and showed the power. So I think Tristan Casas, like if you're looking for the next generation of first baseman, he's one of the guys that you're hoping takes a step forward.
The one thing you said that I'd kind of object to is calling first base shallowish.
Mm-hmm.
Though, I mean, I have had the experience in like a 15-team league where it's like, oh crap, I didn't address first base early enough. Obviously, that's a deeper league, but I feel like if we can't view first base as deep, then there's really not a position we can view as deep. It's at least it's. I guess it doesn't have a lot of. I guess it doesn't have. I don't know, a lot of clear early rounders, but it's really deep in the middle with guys like Christian Walker and Nate Lowe and Rhys Hoskins, Rowdy Tellez, who you mentioned, Frank. And then if they all go, you can fall back on a Ty France. I've been okay in some of those deeper leagues just going with Miguel Vargas or Tristan Casas just as straight as my starter there, because that's how much confidence I have in them as rookies.
I think part of it is I don't like Anthony Rizzo or Rowdy Tellez as much as you guys do.
Okay.
I think they're one-trick ponies, and it's a good trick hitting home runs. If you're going to have one trick, hitting 30 home runs is a pretty good one, but I don't
23 guys did it last year.
A lot, yeah, and they are two of them, but neither was nearly as good prior to that in 2021 especially. And I don't know, like Rizzo especially, it feels like you're getting power and nothing else, especially in a roto league. In a points league, his plate discipline does make him a little better, but then you've got the fact that he's probably not going to play a full slate of games anyway. So I don't know. Rizzo doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence.
I would just say that first base is probably the position where I'm most willing to wait. I'm more scared of the scarcities elsewhere. So, shortstop is deep at the top. Second base is deep at the bottom. First base is deep in the middle is kind of how I'd break it down.
Wow. Chris turning his back on the big, beefy baseball Tellez. You hate to see it, man.
I mean, look, I love him.
I do agree that I think we could see a changing of the guard soon-ish at first base with Andrew Vaughn, if he could take off. Tristan Casas, you mentioned prospects like Matt Mervis and Kyle Manzardo, hopefully coming up and making an impact this season as well. Scott, real quick, who's your favorite first baseman at Target?
Vinny P, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Baby. He usually goes a little earlier since I'm waiting at first base and I can't get him, but I'd like to get him.
My favorite to draft is Rowdy Tellez. Not only were there only 23 players to hit 30-plus home runs last year, there was only 10 to hit 35 or more. Rowdy Tellez was one of those. I would expect the batting average to be up this year. He lost a bunch of hits to the shift last season. Yeah, he's not going to be a standout, but 240, 250 with 30-plus home runs, that's pretty much what we're expecting from Rhys Hoskins, and Rowdy Tellez goes later than Rhys Hoskins. Let's slide over to second base, and we know that there are 4 pretty interesting, fun players up top in Jose Altuve, Marcus Semien, Jazz Chisholm, and Ozzie Albies. And then, it falls off definitely in terms of talent, but it's kind of deep with bounce back candidates. One of those, Chris, is it weird that Jorge Polanco has not appeared in a spring training game yet? I didn't realize that. I looked up his spring stats today to see, well, I haven't heard Jorge Polanco's name. What is he doing? Nothing. He hasn't done anything.
It's weird because at the start of spring training, he said he was fully healthy. He's apparently working out and hitting and playing on the back lots every day. So I don't know how much to be concerned about that. But, the status of Jorge Polanco, a lot about how I feel about this position is kind of riding on Jorge Polanco, because I think if him and Brandon Lau bounce back, I feel really good about the second base position. I think both those guys have a ton of upside. I think both of them have very good explanations for why they struggled last season. But, if the knee tendonitis is already an issue for Jorge Polanco, and to be clear, it's not clear if it actually is an issue right now, or if they're just taking it easy with him because they know they've got a long season and he's a vet who doesn't really need all that much time to get up to speed. Whatever it is, it's a little weird. Yeah, it hasn't scared me off of drafting him yet, but that's also because he goes, 10th round or later more often than not.
A few names that we've mentioned on recent podcasts that are on the rise. Vaughn Grissom, the ADP is on the rise now that, people are getting back into fantasy baseball, starting, to realize, wow, Vaughn Grissom is a starting shortstop for the Atlanta Braves. Well, he has second base eligibility as well. And a deep sleeper, someone who's turning some heads in spring training, is Michael Massey, someone, Scott, that I know you like quite a bit as well. Talk to me about second base and your favorite to draft at the position.
Yeah, so I said a minute ago, second base is deep at the bottom. So whether you view this as shallow or deep probably depends on what size league you're talking about. If you're in a 10-team league, you're probably going to think, second base is awful. If you're in a 15-team league, this is one of the positions where you can probably afford to wait, because there is great value in players like Jorge Polanco, Brandon Lau, and I think especially Ketel Marte. Ketel Marte is barely being drafted inside the top 200, even though
outside the top 200 right now. He's
outside the
202
top
or something,
200.
I think, in NFC ADP at least.
So prior to last year, Ketel Marte had a 3-year stretch where he hit like 318 with an OPS over 900. And now he's just forgotten. The Statcast data was pretty good for him last year, even though he struggled. So yeah, I like Ketel Marte. So there's a lot to fall back on at second base if you don't get the high end options. And when I say high end, second base other than catcher is the only position without somebody who you could make the case should go in the first round. So it's Jose Altuve. You might see him go late in the second, more likely in the third. And that's the one who I think I'm most comfortable. Like the only one of the high end targets that I'm willing to reach for is Jose Altuve, because I think he is, I think he's a distant first in my mind, because he stands out in batting average and can help in steals and is one of the best power threats at the position. And bats in a great lineup. So I love getting Jose Altuve. I'm going to go ahead and say he's my favorite to target, even though that just kind of depends if he lasts to me in round 3. If he does, I'm pretty much always going to take Jose Altuve. But if he doesn't, unless I get good value on Semien, Ozzie Albies, or Jazz Chisholm, In the case of Albies or Chisholm, that probably means round 5, not earlier. Then I'm probably going to go for one of those bounce back candidates I just talked about: Jorge Polanco, Brandon Lau, or Ketel Marte.
I noticed, Scott, you keep skipping over a name there when you say bounce back candidates.
Jonathan India.
Jonathan India.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Yeah, I know you like him as a bounce back candidate, and I have him in a couple of deep leagues. I don't feel like he has the same upside as that group. I think he kind of played over his head as a rookie, and
I think the de-juiced ball might have killed his value.
No, don't say that.
He's a very pull-heavy fly ball hitter who plays in a very, very good home park. So, like, he could be the kind of guy who maximizes his power, but I just don't think it's a particularly special skill set.
No, that's fair. I mean, I could see, high teens and home runs, and he's talked about running to run more this year. I think he's capable of it. I don't think the sprint speed is particularly, very high for Jonathan India, but I think he could give you 10 to 15 steals, maybe 18 to 20 home runs.
I think that's fine. I just think Polanco, Marte, and Lau have the potential for more than that.
Yeah, the thing I will say about the second base position is, like, part of why I don't like Andres Jimenez is I don't know if there's that much difference between him and, I mean, really, like, Jonathan India. I think Jimenez is a better bet for batting average, but, like, or even, like, I'm not sure there's that much of a difference between Andres Jimenez and Gene Segura.
Yes.
And so when I look at the second base position, it's weirdly deep. It's shallow on impact players, but, like, I think once you hit, like, 6, because I do think Tommy Edman, just because he's such a good steal source and so proven in that regard, I would take him ahead of Andres Jimenez. But I think once you hit Jimenez, it's like, I don't know how much of a difference there is between Jimenez and, some of the next 10 guys. I think Jimenez clearly showed some upside last year, but I don't think he has more upside than Ketel Marte, realistically. Maybe because of the stolen bases, but, like, we've seen Ketel Marte be a 900 OPS bat,
I still really like Gene Segura. Just if you play in a deep league, you need a fallback, someone that's not going to hurt you. I think that's Gene Segura. Chris, real quick, just give me a name, your favorite to draft at second base.
I'd say Brandon Lau.
All right, let's take our first break. And when we return, the Listener League participants will be revealed on Fantasy Baseball Today.
The top players from the best schools and conferences in Black college basketball will compete for the second ever HBCU All-Star Game, April 2nd on CBS.
Welcome back into Fantasy Baseball Today. Once again, big thanks to all of the Listener League submissions, the creativity, the thoughtfulness, all different types of songs, poems, haikus, memes, stories, videos, and everything in between. It was a very tough decision. I actually had my wife narrow it down. It took up my entire day. So it's fun to do, but it is very time consuming. I shouldn't leave all of it till the end. That's partially my fault as well. Let's start with the big reveal. 12-team head-to-head points league, which will be drafted this coming Tuesday night, March 21st at, what did we agree to? 9 p.m. Eastern time? Is that cool, Scott?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, 9 p.m. Eastern time?
Sure.
All right. Apologies if I mispronounce your name, because I'm sure there will be a few that I just completely butcher. Joining Scott, Chris, and me will be Daniel Boger, Adam Lenarski, Tom Kopech, Terry Gensler, Sean Snow, Noah Cocaine UN, Dave Wilson, Aubrey Green, and Kyle B., who didn't provide a last name. The email is SeanConnery03. So congrats to those who have made it into the 12-team head-to-head points league. Looking forward to drafting with all of you. That'll be, again, this Tuesday, March 21st, 9 p.m. Eastern time. We'll do that draft live on YouTube.
I think I remember mocking with Sean Snow once.
Yes.
I remember You Know Nothing, Sean Snow.
We banned him because he kept stealing all of our players. But then he came up with a bunch of great memes, so I let him join the league.
Okay.
Next up, we have the 16-team head-to-head categories for the People League, drafting the following Monday night, March 27th at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Joining Chris Scott, and myself will be Gareth Cummins. No relationship to Heath, I don't think, at least. Evan Pryor, Brian Williams, Justin Finney, Alfredo G, no last name, Corey Cassaw, Chris Grosskreutz. I'm sorry. Keaton and Sean Patel. They're in there as partners. It's a father-son duo. Kevin Sester, Brady Francisco, Brendan Zachary, Roy Copens, and Template US. For reasons I can't get into, but you know who you are. Congrats to everybody. If you heard your name, email frank.stampfl@cbsinteractive.com. If I don't hear from you in the next day or two, I'll reach out and we'll get you in the leagues and all that kind of fun stuff. Brian Williams in the For the People League, he made an awesome FBT bingo card. If anybody wants to play, if you want a copy, reach out and I will email you one because it is amazing and I loved it. And I'll play a few songs throughout the podcast just for you to get a feel for the people who won. And let me pull up the first one here. We're going to start with Gimme Aaron Judge. This is by Evan Pryor, sung to the tune of In the Club by 50 Cent. Enjoy.
Go, 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 go. Got lucky, I got the first pick. Fist pump in the air, I got the first pick. Straight jumping for joy, I got the first pick. I knew just who I'll be taking with my first pick. Give me Aaron Judge, mountain of a man, I'm going to invest. Not even gonna discuss, only take the best. I ain't taking scrubs, they call me Scotty Dubs. Way I rise above, give me Aaron Judge, mountain of a man, I'm going to invest. Not even gonna discuss, only take the best. I ain't into taking scrubs, they call me Scotty Dubs. Way I rise above.
Very nice job there from Evan.
Honestly, the second verse is even better. The lyrics.
Yeah, it is really good. It's
the
really
lyrics good. Pretty awesome.
If anyone wants to hear it, just email me and I'll send you a copy of it. But a few Scotty Dubs references in there as well. You got to love it. Let's quickly talk about some news and notes. Edwin Diaz underwent successful surgery to repair his torn patellar tendon. So that's the official diagnosis. Going to be out for the entire season with the New York Mets. We don't have any clarity. I don't think. I haven't seen anything on who will close there. I know David Robertson threw a clean inning in spring training here on Thursday. Has anything changed for you guys in terms of the Mets bullpen?
It does seem like there are more beat writers saying David Robertson than Ottavino. I still put Ottavino slightly ahead in my rankings for now because I'm not sure they're basing that on anything other than just looking at last year's save totals. But I've seen that from a couple beat writers that they're using Robertson's name more than Ottavino's.
So Scott, you have Adam Ottavino up at RP 25. I have David Robertson, who I think is the favorite, at RP 31. That number needs to be higher, but I think he's probably in this group of Alex Lang, Kyle Finnegan, kind of Craig Kimbrell. I'm doing an NFBC draft. And let me quickly pull that up because David Robertson just went in round 12 of a 15-team league. So that would be like pick 170, somewhere around there.
Yeah. And one name we haven't mentioned yet is Brooks Raley. He's a left-hander, great numbers with the Rays last year. He was one guy who we were duped into believing might be emerging as the closer there. And so if they sign Zach Britton, as has been rumored, then that might free up Raley for more save opportunities as another left-hander. So I don't know. It could become really messy. I think Ottavino's their best reliever. So that's when there's a question, that's usually where I lean.
All right. A few standout performances from Thursday. Brendan Pfaadt with the Arizona Diamondbacks, starting pitching prospect, 7 strikeouts over 4 innings in relief. He's not on the 40-man roster right now. I actually texted the Welsh. Oh, by the way, the Welsh couldn't make it today, so he sends his apologies. But I asked him, what's the deal with the 5th starter with the Arizona Diamondbacks? And he gave me a little tidbit that Dre Jameson came out to work with the bullpen guys when Welsh was at Diamondbacks camp this week. So he thinks maybe with Melanson going on the IL, there's a chance that Jameson will be using the bullpen and that Brendan Pfaadt has a real opportunity to be the 5th starter for the Diamondbacks. So Just wanted to throw that out there. Clark Schmidt threw 5 perfect innings with 7 strikeouts for the Yankees. Reed Detmers continues his awesome spring, 5 innings, 1 run, 6 strikeouts. And we did have some Pirates injuries. Andrew McCutchen dealing with some minor right elbow soreness, and Carlos Santana dealing with knee discomfort. Chris, did you have any takeaways on the performances of, I guess, sleeper types, Brendan Pfaadt and Clark Schmidt?
Yeah, I mean, Pfaadt looks great this spring. So, the nice thing is they'll have to put him on the 40-man roster at some point. So we'll get, a definitive answer whether he's going to be up with the team on opening day, at some point. But yeah, I think he's moving into the late round discussion. And I think Clark Schmidt belongs there too, given the injuries that the Yankees have in the rotation. With Rodon, maybe he only misses a couple turns in the rotation. Clark Schmidt kind of battling with Domingo Germán at this point. Now I think he's, they're both likely in the rotation to start the season. I think Clark Schmidt might be the better pitcher. Domingo Germán, he's fine. He's been a consistent 4 ERA guy, even when he's been good. So I'd rather see Schmidt get the opportunity. He's added, I think, a cutter to his arsenal this spring. That is,
and I was looking at the data for Clark Schmidt. The spin rates on his pitches are crazy. The fastball, slider, and curveball, all 3. The curveball gets close to 3,000 RPM, which is
I think he's pretty good.
Charlie Morton level.
He did have prospect pedigree, Clark Schmidt. I mean, there was people in the organization that had a good amount of confidence in him. So excited to see what Clark Schmidt could do. Definitely should be drafted in deeper leagues as of now. One other name I wanted to mention, Jeffrey Springs had another really great start. 4 1/3, 3 hits, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. His great spring continues. Let's get back into position preview updates. And we have shortstop. We know that this is it's a deep position until it's not. It's 15, 16 players deep and then just falls off of a cliff. There's still some kind of interesting names. Scott, I know you like Ezekiel Tovar as well. The hype guys, Corey Seager and O'Neal Cruz, are on the rise. Consistently seeing them as 5th round picks in 12-team leagues, sometimes 4th round for Corey Seager. So those guys are on the rise, as is Anthony Volpe, who has moved ahead of Oswald Peraza in terms of redraft value and should be drafted in all leagues. Scott, your thoughts?
So what is the latest ADP on Volpe? Because
I'll look up the last week or so and let you know.
I think it's still around 350 for the last week, but you can confirm that. Shortstop, like I said, it's the position that's deep at the top. So how the experience for you is going to depend, like I said, at second base on how deep your league is. If you're in a 12-team or 10-team league with no middle infield spots, so just every team has 1 shortstop spot to fill, some pretty good shortstops are going to be available for a long time. The big drop off for me is after Willy Adames and Carlos Correa, which is how many players into the position is that? It's about 14 players in the position. Some of those guys are multi-eligible. Bobby Witt's probably going to play third base for whoever drafts him. Maybe Tommy Edman at second. Maybe Fernando Tatis eventually, whoever drafts him moves him to the outfield. So but the point is, if it's a 12-team league, there is enough for everybody to have one, and there's definitely no reason to reach. If it's a deeper league, like if it's a 15-team roto league where there's a middle infield spot to fill, then Carlos Correa and Wander Franco are probably going to both be gone by the end of round 8 or something like that, fairly early.
Correa tends to last longer than he should. His ADP just over the last week since I pulled it up, because Volpe's 291 over the last week at NFC drafts. Correa is still going behind Jeremy Pena in NFC drafts over the last week.
Yep.
I don't think that makes any sense. I think there's a clear a drop off after Carlos Correa, but Correa is the one guy, if you're inclined to wait, there are 13 shortstop eligible players going inside of the top 90. Then there's Jeremy Pena about 2 rounds later, and then a round after that or so is Carlos Correa.
Yeah, I wrote 2 articles this past week, just kind of like an ADP review. The most overrated and the most underrated by ADP. Jeremy Pena was one of my most overrated. Carlos Correa was one of my most underrated. That big tier at shortstop by ADP, it begins with Xander Bogaerts and ends with Carlos Correa. I think Carlos Correa might be better than Xander Bogaerts this year. So generally how I approach shortstop is unless I can get two of my breakout, the two breakout picks of mine at this position, Corey Seager and O'Neal Cruz, unless I can get them in that round 5 range, then I'm probably going to try to wait out that ginormous tier that ends with Carlos Correa, and most likely Correa being the one I target. And if I miss out, which I'm very unlikely to do in a shallow league, but if it's deeper league and I miss out, I don't know that all hope is lost, because for deep league purposes, I've kind of come around to Ahmed Rosario and Nico Horner. They're not flashy, but they help in batting average and stolen bases, which are two difficult categories to fill at that stage of the draft. And I think they're fine for deeper league purposes.
In NFC drafts over the last week, Ahmed Rosario is only 9 spots behind Carlos Correa, and Nico Horner is only 8 spots behind him. Yeah, I'd definitely rather have Correa. Yeah.
But they do get dragged up in those deeper formats. I'm just saying it's not all hope is lost in those deep leagues after you miss out on Correa.
Yeah, and the thing to keep in mind is NFC drafts are 15 teams, so
not all of
them. Their main ones are. Right. And Nico Horner is number 17. We mentioned Bobby Witt and Tommy Edman probably playing at other positions, so that's kind of the end of that starting tier.
Yeah, and like I said, for a shallow league, Nico Horner and Ahmed Rosario don't make the cut for me. Like that's a failure if I fall if I'm forced to take them in a shallow league. But in a deep league, I think it's fine. And if I miss out on them, I am really excited about Ezekiel Tovar. And I used to say Oswald Peraza, but now, as you mentioned, Frank, I'm leading more toward Anthony Volpe as like an extreme fallback at this position.
Yeah, I'm actually doing a 15-team slow draft over at the NFBC right now. Our buddy Greg Lathrop is actually a part of it. We randomly joined together, had no idea. I wound up with Javier Baez as my starting shortstop. I don't love it, but it's the 12th round. I think it's okay value in a 15-team league. So he's another just kind of deep fallback option, I would say. Volpe, I wanted to mention what he's done so far in the spring. He's 10 for 30 with 2 home runs and 4 steals and OPS over 1,100. I think we could have, not to the same extent, but a Jordan Walker situation where if Volpe is named to the Yankees opening day roster, he's going to move up 100 picks, 150. Yep. Like he's probably going to go inside the top 200 or even the top 150. So keep that in mind if it happens.
I think there's still a lot of hesitance to draft him, but that could change very quickly.
All right. Your favorite to draft at shortstop? Just give me a name.
Corey Seager.
Chris?
Probably Carlos Correa, although it's O'Neal Cruz.
All right. It's Corey Seager.
Fernando Tatis also.
Yeah. It's Corey Seager for me as well. Let's move over to third base. We still don't know for sure if Jordan Walker will make the Cardinals, but drafters seem to be expecting it. Walker now up to about a 130 ADP in the month of March. Alec Boehm is having a big spring. He added some muscle in the offseason. We'll see if it translates to the regular season. Justin Turner got hit in the face with a pitch. He required 16 stitches. Reds prospect Christian Encarnacion Strand made a bunch of noise, had a monster spring, but did get sent down to the minors. Chris, I'll throw this one your way. Are you still drafting Encarnacion Strand and stashing him with the hopes that he'll be up soon, a month, 2 months into the season?
No, I don't think he's the caliber of prospect that needs to be drafted and stashed, especially in like a 12-team league. Maybe in a deeper 15-team league where you've got some bench spots to play with, possibly. But even there, it's hard to stash prospects in a 15-team league if you don't have, in those NFC drafts, especially where you don't have IL spots, it becomes very, very tricky. So, no, I don't think that, I'm super interested in stashing Christian Encarnacion Strand.
All right. Another prospect that's having a big spring is Brett Beatty with the New York Mets. And he is 12 for 32 with a home run, 2 steals, batting .375. Scott, what do you think is the latest on Brett Beatty? The likelihood he makes the opening day roster? I don't even know. Would he be an everyday player? They have Escobar. They have Marcana in left field. So I don't know. It's kind of dicey on Brett Beatty.
Yeah, I haven't heard a lot on that situation. I think I heard mention at one point that they were trying Escobar in the outfield to give him a little exposure there. There's been talk that Brett Beatty might ultimately wind up in the outfield. So the fact that he's still around, like they haven't optioned him yet, suggests there's at least a chance. And I'm excited about Brett Beatty. Good numbers across the board in the minors, including plate discipline. The little bit we saw in the majors of him last year, didn't strike out much, hit the ball very hard, even against fellow left-handers. So I think at this very thin position, and look, I'd be remiss not to point out, as much as I've been obsessing about third base throughout this entire draft prep season, like this is the most important position in my mind. This is, you got these glob of early round studs at the top: Jose Ramirez, Manny Machado, Rafael Devers, Austin Riley, Bobby Witt, and Nolan Arenado. You got those 6, but they're all pretty much gone by the end of round 2. Arenado might make it to early in round 3. And then after they're gone, it's really sketchy, really dicey. There are few potential high-end options that you're probably going to have to reach for. So my top priority in drafts this year is to draft a third baseman in round 2, basically. And if I don't, things don't usually turn out well. And the reason it came to mind talking about Brett Beatty is because, okay, here we have a guy maybe a little bit of upside that's being overlooked at this position. But of course, it's entirely contingent on him making the roster, which still seems like a bit of a long shot.
I thought you were going to say, Scott, it came up talking about Brett Beatty because we did a mock draft the other day, and you wound up with Brett Beatty as your starting third baseman.
Because I was picking first overall, so I was picking last in round 2, and all of those third basemen, including Arenado, were gone. And so that's what I'm hoping to avoid.
Scott, who is your favorite of that early round group?
I like Devers slightly more than Machado, depending on the scoring a little bit. But in standard scoring, I like him a tiny bit more. His ADP is actually late in round 2. I don't know how. No draft has been available late in round 2. But I guess I would say, relative to the consensus, Devers is my favorite and probably the one I'm going to wind up with the most.
Chris, which third baseman is your favorite to draft?
I'm kind of all over the place with third base. I probably have a lot of Manny Machado. I probably have a lot of Anthony Rendon, and then kind of anything in between. So I wouldn't say it's certainly not as much of a priority for me as it is for Scott. And, because of that, I don't necessarily have one guy that I go with. It really depends on where in the draft I am.
I'd like to get one of the early guys. I like getting Manny Machado, Devers, really any of that group, even Bobby Witt Jr. in a Roto League. Totally fine with that. If I miss out on that group, trying to draft Gunnar Henderson in the middle rounds, not really worried about this, but he is 2 for 21 in the spring. He's got no home runs and no steals. So it's just something I've noticed, but I'll throw it out there. Before we hit the break, let's get another one of these listener league submission songs that we received. This next one is for you, Chris, and it is a rendition of Taylor Swift's Willow from our league mate Terry Gensler.
I was excited when the draft came up that night, but when it finished, I just knew something wasn't right. And third base is a very dark place. I took you, Brian, but I wasn't safe. Yandy isn't quite the best escape. The more that hay swings, the less I know. When Diaz hits, the worms take a blow. Waiting for you to raise that launch and go, yeah, and go, yeah.
Beautiful.
I don't know really anything about Taylor Swift. I'm sorry, Chris. But hearing that song, I was like, I kind of want to hear the actual version now.
It's a good song. She's great. She's she's This generation Springsteen. Come at me, haters.
Oh, gosh. All right, well, with that, let's take our final break, and we'll get to more position preview updates here on Fantasy Baseball Today.
Hey, Calvin, you play golf. You think you can win one of those green jackets at the Masters?
Well, if it's for being the most loving neighbor of the year, yes.
It's a tradition unlike any other. The Masters on CBS.
All right. Well, we've got about 15 to 20 minutes to talk about, I don't know, two of the most important positions and then relief pitcher. So let's do it. Outfield, super strong first round, kind of blah in the middle, and then a bunch of interesting names late. That's basically what I came up with for outfield. Since our position previews, a lot has happened. Yordan Alvarez dealing with hand soreness, swinging a bat, has not appeared in a spring training game yet. Mitch Haniger, Harrison Bader, and Seiya Suzuki all have oblique strains. Suzuki and Bader will not be ready on opening day. Not sure yet on Mitch Haniger. Garrett Mitchell had a hot start, but is now dealing with a hamstring injury. The hope is for him to return to spring training action next week. And if all goes well, then he is still a fun sleeper candidate as well. Players on the rise, Corbin Carroll, Anthony Santander is destroying the WBC right now. Lars Nootbaar, Riley Green, and Jared Kelnick, I believe, stole another base on Thursday. The guy's just smacking bombs, running wild. Hopefully it can translate into the regular season. A lot of prospect fun. Oscar Colas with the White Sox, Sal Frelick doing very well for Team Italy in the World Baseball Classic, and some deep league steam for Josh Lowe and Alec Thomas. Some bad news. Brian De La Cruz might not make the opening day roster for the Miami Marlins. Chris, I just hit on a bunch of different things, so anything you'd like to address and your favorite outfielder or outfielders to draft?
I think Riley Green probably would be my favorite outfielder to draft. Really believe in the breakout potential for him. The Brian De La Cruz stuff, it's frustrating. Jesus Sanchez having a very good spring, so I think and he has options, and Brian De La Cruz doesn't, so that's probably the explanation there. Marlins kind of backed themselves into a corner with some of their roster moves, so I think Brian De La Cruz will get a chance at some point. I did draft Oscar Colas in a mock draft today for the first time. It was like 250th overall. Felt good about that. Happy about that one. And I really love to see Josh Lowe and Alec Thomas starting to get some love, because those are two guys later in your draft, especially your 15-team leagues, who absolutely should be drafted. Not 100% clear if they both have starting jobs, but I think it's more likely than not in each case. And they were players we were really excited about this time last year. I don't think they've just lost their talent. So I like Alec Thomas and Josh Lowe, especially as post-type bounce backs.
Perfect range to target Oscar Colas, too. I'm looking at the last week of NFBC ADP. The ADP for Colas is 254. So spot on there. If you want him, probably have to take him around 250. Scott, any thoughts on any of the things that I brought up? Strategy, favorite outfielder to draft this season?
Well, of course, I would still say outfield. Like, third base is the most important position. Outfield is the thinnest position, considering you have at least 3 of those spots to fill, maybe 5. And so, like, it's pretty much imperative for me to get an outfielder in round 1. 7 go there, so there are a lot of really high-end types. It might be 8 in a points league with Mike Trout, and I just want to make sure that I'm one of the ones taking one of them if I can. Usually I want 3 by the time my top 30 are gone, because that's where I see the biggest drop off. So that's kind of like after, I think by ADP, the last of them is Hunter Renfroe, or you know what? I may have moved Lars Nootbaar into that group, though I'm sure Lars Nootbaar's ADP is lower. He's a very trendy pick and tends to go earlier in industry drafts. But that's about the point where, like, I want 3 outfielders. That's others in that range: Taylor Ward, Anthony Santander, because things get pretty scary after that. I will say, though, that what's probably changed since the position preview is that I have come up with more late round targets that I like at this position. Oscar Colas is one. Riley Green is one. We've mentioned them. But 2 that I've been gravitating toward a lot lately are Garrett Mitchell, who I think is going to be just a huge source of steals for the Brewers, and Jake Fraley, who I think could be a power speed threat with good on base skills in the Reds lineup. I guess kind of a poor man's Lars Nootbaar actually. The skill indicators aren't as strong as for Nootbaar, but of course he has a great park. Fraley does, and probably going to steal more bases than Nootbaar. So I like Fraley a lot. Kelnick, I wouldn't mind taking a flyer on after his big spring, which has continued. That Brian De La Cruz thing is weird because he was like the fantasy MVP of September. What have you done for me lately, I guess? But yeah, that's how I break down outfield right now.
All right, some of my favorite targets to draft: Eloy Jimenez. Chris, did you you watched that Puerto Rico game, right?
Yes.
Eloy Jimenez looks like a different human. He is in fantastic shape.
Yes.
And they were talking about it on the broadcast too. So he worked hard this offseason, got the body right. Hopefully that can help him stay healthy. But
hopefully not playing outfield will also help.
Hopefully, cross your fingers. No Eloy in the outfield. Stay healthy, and we have a big season coming. Lars Nootbaar, the name continues to come up. The ADP over the past week is 167. So now inside of the top 170 over the past week. So if you want Nootbaar, you got to pull him up a little bit. And Jorge Soler is someone that I wind up with quite a bit. Power is not easy to find later on in drafts. If you listen to Scott, you probably don't need to find power later on in your drafts. Sometimes I need to. And Jorge Soler is someone that I find myself targeting. If he could stay on the field, I think he can give you 25 plus home runs outside of the top 300 ADP, which obviously that's pretty damn late. Let's get into starting pitcher. Now, I got a few more songs. Let's play another song, and then we'll get into starting pitcher, relief pitcher. This next one that I have is called Draft Andrew Vaughn. It's by Brady Francisco, and it's sung to the tune of Since You've Been Gone by Kelly Clarkson. Enjoy.
Here's the thing, we'll start in round 10. Goldie's gone, so is Matt Olsen. Yeah, yeah. Draft Andrew Vaughn. You followed Scott's tears, you took an ace. Now you got no one at first base. Yeah, yeah. Draft Andrew Vaughn. And Vinny Pasquantino was drafted several rounds ago. Goodbye, Vinny Pasquantino. And draft Andrew Vaughn. He's your last hope at first base. La Rosa's gone. Yeah, yeah. After him, you won't get what you want.
Props for going with the slow version too, because I feel like your voice is just accentuated when you're singing that version of Since You've Been Gone. But yeah, if you want to be like Brady Francisco, then you can draft Andrew Vaughn. Help out your problems there at first base. Let's get into starting pitcher. Oh gosh, where do we start? Jacob deGrom has been slowed by a left side injury, made a minor league start this past week, but has not made an official spring training start yet. Carlos Rodon has a forearm injury. Sounds like he's doing better if all goes well. Only misses 2 to 3 starts. That's if everything goes well. Joe Musgrove has a fractured toe, might only miss 1 start at the beginning of the season. Tyler Glasnow has an oblique injury and will try and return in early May. Kyle Wright has been delayed with a shoulder injury, but will make his spring debut next week. Tony Gonsolin has an ankle injury and will miss some time. We didn't get an official timetable here, right? I just know they said they're going to take it slow.
Yeah, I think he's supposed to start his throwing program before spring ends is what I saw. So I don't think it's going to be a long absence, maybe all of April, but maybe not.
Okay. Lance McCullers has a forearm injury, but has started a throwing program. We don't have a timetable on him yet either. Jose Quintana will miss 3 months or so with a rib injury. David Peterson and Tyler McGill are competing for the Mets' 5th starter job. Some risers, some hype guys throughout spring training: Christian Javier, Chris Sale, Pablo Lopez, and Reed Detmers. If I miss anything, please just feel free to throw it, out there when I send it your way. Reported new pitch or higher velocity this spring training: Zach Wheeler has been working with a sweeper. Everyone's working with a sweeper. Robbie Ray, velocity is up, throwing a splitter. Logan Gilbert went to Driveline this offseason. He's throwing a splitter. Pablo Lopez has a new curveball / sweeper. Velocity was up in his World Baseball Classic start. Joe Ryan throwing a splitter, I believe a new slider. Velocity also up a little bit. Sean Manaea, his velocity was up early on in spring. I feel like I haven't heard much about it since then. Some prospects. Grayson Rodriguez should be in the rotation on opening day for the Orioles. Hunter Brown in there for the Astros as long as Lance McCullers is out. Hayden Wesneski looks great for the Cubs, and there's an opening there. And so does Brandon Pfaadt, who has a chance with the Diamondbacks. All right, Scott. Lots of names, lots of news, all kinds of things shifting around. Any other information you've developed this spring and some of your favorites to target at starting pitcher?
Well, for as big as this position is and for as critical as it's been in recent years, I think coming out of the juice ball era, it's become a kind of the least interesting position to me. Like certainly the one I prioritize least early in drafts, because I feel like the middle class has come to be so big with so many options I feel good about that I'm just not that particular about who I get. So Chris Sale, as you pointed out, is one that I've moved up a lot. I've moved him. He at the start when we did the starting pitcher preview, he was probably closer to Charlie Morton in my rankings, and now he's closer to like Tristan McKenzie in my rankings. Very excited about him. But that's, I'm usually targeting him as like a number 3 for as high as I have him, which goes to show you how much depth there is here. I'm not taking a starting pitcher probably in the first 4 rounds. By the time the tier with like Dylan Cease, Alek Manoah, Julio Urias, Max Fried, by the time that's beginning to deplete, that's usually when I go for my first pitcher. And I have yet to conduct a draft this year where I came out of it thinking, oh boy, my pitching's a big issue. I keep trying to. I keep pushing the envelope, and it just never happens. I like 4 old guys in particular. They're not old necessarily. I'm going to call them the 4 horsemen. We've referred to them as the Mount Rushmore before. It is
Scott,
Merrill Kelly.
Scott, you fought to keep Mount Rushmore. You got to keep it now. You can't go with 4.
Well, it's not that I was that, it's that people kept throwing, like it gained momentum of its own. People started saying Mount Rushmore to me as if we're all supposed to know what they're talking about. It's a bit arcane as a nickname, so I don't like it, but it has a lot of momentum. Anyway, the pitchers are Merrill Kelly, Miles Michaelis, Tyler Anderson, Martin Perez. They were all top 40 among starting pitchers last year. They're all going outside the top 200 overall this year. And if I can grab a couple of those guys to really stabilize some of my risky picks earlier, I tend to do it. And I tend to be happy with what results.
Chris, anything that has stood out to you so far this spring? Any particular starting pitcher strategy? I know typically you wind up with 1 or 2 aces early on in your drafts, and then you wait a little bit. What are you thinking, and who are your favorite starting pitchers to draft?
Yeah, I've usually got 2 starting pitchers when Scott's got 1, and then we're probably taking our 3rd starting pitcher around the same time. So, the top end is a little bit different, but I want probably 2 starting pitchers with my first 5 picks is usually how I go, maybe 6th pick. And then I usually don't take another one until the 10th round. And that's usually Chris Sale, who I've moved inside of my top 100 overall. He's my starting pitcher number 27. So take that, Scott. I'm the Chris Sale guy. And a lot of my favorite pitching staffs are Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, and then like Chris Sale, Dustin May, Jesus Luzardo. That is a really, really fun group that I love to draft. Like you can typically get them like 12, 13, 14. And I think all 3 of those guys just have a ton of upside for various reasons. And I think Dustin May actually has a pretty high floor. Obviously injuries and innings will limit his ceiling, but I think when he's on the mound, I think Dustin May, just the skill set is really, really strong. Even if like he doesn't get the strikeouts we hope he will, he's so hard to hit that I think he shares a lot of similarities with like Sandy Alcantara. Obviously, if you get 70 fewer innings from Dustin May than Sandy Alcantara, I think you take it as a win this year. But I think that's still a very, very nice pitcher to have. So Scott and I have somewhat different strategies, but mostly it's just I want 280 inning aces to anchor my staff to make me feel better about the same risks that Scott and I are going to be taking in the mid to late rounds. I'd rather do that than, like I don't really ever draft the Golden Girls.
We're just gonna have like 5 different nicknames for this group.
But yeah,
the Boar 4 was one somebody came up with.
That's good.
There's basically, I think the way to look at it with starting pitchers, unless you're in a 15-team league, and even then, there's probably never a point where there isn't a starting pitcher I like.
So you brought up Luzardo, Lodolo, Dustin May. Those are about, on average, the 40th starting pitchers off the board. That just goes to show, because I think everybody hears those names and they're like, oh yeah, there's a lot of upside there. 40th? So if you're talking a 10-team league, that's like everybody's number 4 starter. That just goes to show you how much depth there is.
But even like Reed Detmers is like the 60th starting pitcher, 55th starting pitcher off the board. And you still have Patrick Sandoval and John Gray and Jack Flaherty and Tony Gonsolin going after him, Edward Cabrera. Like there's just no shortage of starting pitchers at every point in the draft.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mostly agree with you, Chris. I like to get a couple of aces early. It's one of the Mets guys, Verlander or Scherzer or Brandon Woodruff is someone I find myself drafting a lot. I am very exposed to Zach Wheeler, so I need him to stay healthy and have a big season. He's kind of a fallback option for me. I have him ranked at SP10. That might be a little bit aggressive. And then I like to target a lot of those high upside guys you got that you mentioned as well. Jeffrey Springs is someone I draft a lot too. So him, and then like the Marlins guys later on, Edward Cabrera, Trevor Rogers is making some noise this spring training. Pablo Lopez kind of caught my eye recently and throwing that new curveball sweeper. So mostly agree with everything you guys said. It's pretty deep, but I still do like to get, can't go on without saying Lance Lynn and Blake Snell. In terms of just like the mid-tier guys, love them too. And I think if you want to grab both of them, I think they complement each other very well. One is an innings eater, and then the other one gives you a bunch of strikeouts. So I do like that combination quite a bit as well. Let's wrap up with relief pitcher. And we just received the big blow yesterday. Edwin Diaz has a torn patellar tendon, will miss the entire season. And it creates these ripple effects within the relief pitcher position where now I think there's 9 relievers that I feel, pretty safe about their job security. And frankly, I want to get one of those 9, but Chris, a already shallow position and shallow category when we're talking about saves just became worse. And as a result, Class A moves up. He's the clear top tier closer. But everyone else just kind of moves up a little bit as well with this injury to Edwin Diaz. You are muted, sir.
Yeah, and that's typically what you see at a position like relief pitcher. I think you can also, talk about tight end or running back in fantasy football or catcher in fantasy baseball, where there are the true difference makers, and then there are the guys we hope can be difference makers. And the true difference makers are always worth the price you pay for them. And it's the next tier that gets pushed up because we try to convince ourselves that they can be difference makers. And it's an iffy strategy. I think getting one of those elite relievers this season more than any other, it really does make a difference. It's not necessarily something I do in every draft, but I am more likely to take Emmanuel Clase or Josh Hader or Jordan Romano this year than I have been in the past, just because, like we talked about in tomorrow's podcast, if you get about 55 saves, you're going to be in the middle of the pack in a 12-team roto league. You can cobble that together and risk your ratios, or you can get Emmanuel Clase and then one other guy who gives you 20 saves, and you're probably going to be at least middle of the pack. So I think it's a very viable strategy to take one of those closers, especially if they fall to like the 6th round, which happens occasionally. I really like doing that.
Scott, we got some news recently on Kyle Finnegan that he could be used more as a fireman reliever. Still expected to be the saves leader for the Washington Nationals, but I think that limits the upside a little bit with Kyle Finnegan. Do we have any answers on Arizona, both Chicago teams, Oakland, Anaheim, Philadelphia, the Dodgers? What do you think?
Still not a lot. I think the one we have the most answers on of those you mentioned is the Cubs.
Yeah.
There was a report from The Athletic that they talked up the role to Michael Fulmer to kind of lure him in, and that Brad Boxberger was also mentioned as a possibility. So that eliminates Brandon Hughes, the left-hander. And I would say Fulmer's the one I want there. Carlos Estevez seems to be a strong leading for the Angels, even though he's had a rough spring. I feel like Scott McGuff is gaining traction in the Diamondbacks bullpen. He's had a good spring and was a closer in Japan the last 2 years. So he's the one I target there, though not with much confidence. I mean, look, my strategy at relief pitcher is to not even mess with these guys. And I'm not like, I'm definitely not big on investing an early round pick at relief pitcher. Like, I'm not going to be drafting Emmanuel Class A. That is the only range in the draft where I feel like you can draft a stud hitter with confidence. And I'm not willing to pass it up for a save source. But I used to say, when we did our position preview, I used to say there were 9 guys you could pencil in for 30 saves this year. Now, of course, there's 8 with Edwin Diaz gone. I try to get one of the last of those off the board, which is usually Kenley Jansen, but sometimes it might be Raisel Iglesias or Felix Bautista, and I'm fine with that as my top closer. Then I try to get one. I'm talking, of course, more in a roto league here. Then I try to get one from David Bednar, Alexis Diaz, or Daniel Bard, who I are pretty confident they're their team's closers, but with it's bad teams and not quite as much confidence, but I feel pretty good about them giving me 20 to 25 saves. Maybe if I miss out on them, I look to a Paul Sewald or a Peter Fairbanks. And then I try to get one of just the really low end guys who I think could find themselves getting a lot of saves, like a Craig Kimbrell or a Jose Leclerc. An Evan Phillips, somebody like that as a third option. And I feel pretty good about my save situation going into the season like that. As I said, that's more for a roto league. Head-to-head points leagues, like that's the format where I still feel confident saying, just give me the best of whatever's left, because every team is probably only drafting 2 relievers. It may be like Scott Barlow and Daniel Bard that I start out with in those two relief pitcher spots, but that's the format since we don't go as deep into the position, where I still feel comfortable playing the waiver wire, expecting to find decent save sources there throughout the year.
And if you play in a head-to-head points league, just some sparks to know. Obviously, starting pitchers as relief pitchers, kind of a cheat code in that format. Spencer Strider is far and away the best one, not even close. So you're probably going to have to draft him in the 3rd or 4th round in that format. And then you drop down to Hunter Brown, which is around pick 200. And then much later, if you just want to take a shot, I'm not saying you have to, but if you want to, Matthew Boyd, Nick Martinez, Yusei Kikuchi, old friend, of course, and David Peterson. If he wins that job, he is relief pitcher eligible on CBS. So worth mentioning that. And just give me a name, guys. Favorite reliever to draft this season is blank.
I'm going to say Kenley Jansen.
Chris?
Yeah, that's fine. Sure.
I like the relative value because of those guys you could pencil in for 30 saves. He seems to be the one with the most skepticism surrounding him.
I would say I've probably drafted Paul Sewald the most, just because, like, if I'm going to take a chance on the first 2 weeks of the season are probably going to see like 8 closers change jobs, or like the guy we thought it wasn't the guy it was, or someone loses their job. So like, if I'm going to invest a late round pick in an iffy guy, I'm going to do it on a guy I'm confident is a very good pitcher who could get saves, rather than some of the guys who I know or feel pretty confident are not good pitchers, but might get saves, and also might be in my lineup for a week and a half, get blown up, get 1 save, lose 3, and never get heard from again. For
me, favorite to draft, it is the Mountain. Felix Bautista, finally healthy. looked good in his debut. Velocity down 1 mile per hour, but I think that can continue to pick up. So I do like Felix Bautista. You guys mentioned Scott McGough. He is someone I have drafted in a lot of draft and hold leagues and in NL only labor. So far this spring, 5 2/3 innings, super small sample, 0 hits allowed. He's been pretty awesome. Sorry for going a little bit late, but man, it's a very important time of year. And obviously you need to know this stuff going into a big draft weekend. We are going to wrap there. We're going to leave you with one more listener song. And this one was from Adam Lenarski, sung to the tune of Juicy by the Notorious B.I.G. It is fantastic. We're wrapped there. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we'll be back again tomorrow with a mailbag. Bye-bye.
Yeah, this roster is dedicated to all the experts that told me Dylan Cease wouldn't amount to nothing. To all the people that saw my team I put together and made fun of me for drafting Jazz Chisholm in the 3rd round when I was just trying to fill a shallow position. And all the sleepers at the tail end, you know what I'm saying? It's all good, baby, baby. It was all a dream. I somehow got Mookie at pick 13. Runs and steals and power hitting will lead my team. Hitting doubles off the wall. Every Saturday with the bat, mister, he can do it all. I drafted Lindor with my pick 4. No third base spot, I have to say I'm sorry, Scott. Way back, there's still Muncie he can hack. Multi-position versatile at that. Remember Dustin May, the redhead star? You never thought that Tommy John would drop him this far. Now I'm in the limelight cause my draft's tight. Time to get saves, oh look, there's Class A.